Good morning, Cletty. This is Romel Fernandez from Primary Environmental. I'm making this video for you guys at Shoprite in Wayne. I am in the middle of a flood over here in LBI, but hopefully with this video and with the documents I've sent over to you guys, you'll be able to have your HACCP plan ready for the health department and have the training to have you guys have a successful inspection. Let's see. First, we're going to start off with why you need a HACCP plan and what is a HACCP plan. So, what is a HACCP plan? A HACCP plan is a written plan. It's based on risks specific to your foods, which for you guys is sushi. And basically, it's almost like a contract between you and the health department. It shows that you have the proper understanding, the proper policies to deal with the dangers specific to sushi. So another question would be, a lot of this, I sent you a guide that has a lot of these questions, but what I want you to understand is that these are going to be like the questions that the typical health inspector will ask you. So they may ask you, and we're going to get into that afterwards, but why does sushi specifically need a HACCP plan? For three reasons. One of them is that sushi is a ready-to-eat food. In order to understand ready-to-eat foods, we have to understand that we have potentially dangerous foods or temperature control for safety foods like milk, eggs, and other things that have to be refrigerated. If these items are not refrigerated, if they're kept in the temperature danger zone, bacteria can multiply and they can become dangerous pretty quickly in as little as 4 hours. So, for us to with sushi, with those foods, a lot of times we're let's say with proteins, we're cooking them in order to kill all the bacteria, all the pathogens in those foods. So chicken we have to cook to 165, beef we have to steak we have to cook to 145. With sushi, we're not cooking these. So any pathogens that are actually on that food are going to stay on that food. And if we put pathogens on that food, just because we're touching it with our hands when we're prepping it, the client is going to eat those pathogens and they can get sick. For that reason, it's really important that we wear gloves, right? Apart from that, we also have another danger. Well, we also have another danger in the fact that sushi is eaten raw, right? Usually we don't worry about parasites because we cook them to the proper minimum internal cooking temperature. But with seafood that's eaten raw, there is the risk of parasites. These are mostly wild fish or wild seafood. So how do we keep sushi grade seafood safe from parasites? Basically, the FDA requires that sushi grade seafood be frozen to minimum standards. What are the minimum standards? Well, it can get kind of complicated, but the basic standard is -4 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 7 days. All right, and basically, if a typical question that an inspector would ask you is, can I see your parasite destruction certificates, or where is your letter from your supplier, right? And basically what they're asking you is a letter from your supplier, and basically the letter is just gonna include the basic FDA requirements. How long has this seafood been frozen, at what temperature? And it can get really complicated, but most of the letters are going to say -4 degrees for longer than 168 hours or 7 days. If there's any seafood, as we talked about, if there's any seafood or sushi that you guys serve that isn't included on some parasite destruction letter or an order history, you may have a problem with the health department. So be sure that you can back up any product that you guys sell with one of those documents. And you're also supposed to keep those documents on file. your parasite destruction certificate should be part of your HACCP plan. Apart from that, the other risk that the health department is going to be looking at, and one of the biggest risks is going to be the potential for bacteria, specifically Bacillus cereus, to grow in rice. Sushi rice is typically kept in a warmer, not under refrigeration or hot holding, like the typical food safety principles dictate, right? So because we keep it in a warmer, it's in the temperature danger zone, so it can become dangerous very quickly. For that reason, our vinegar seasoning that we're going to use, and I'm gonna say that this is vinegar seasoning right here. Our vinegar seasoning that we use, make sure that pH is under 4.1. What that does is it makes it safe for us to keep rice in the warmer for the whole day. Otherwise, we would have to throw that rice away fairly quickly. We couldn't have it more than 4 hours. So the vinegar seasoning makes the sushi rice taste better, but as far as the health department is concerned, they only care that the pH of this rice, once it has the vinegar seasoning in it, is 4.1 or less. All right, and that's all this log needs to show. Apart from that, the pH is measured right when we make the first batch, and every 6 hours afterwards. So if you still have rice after 6 hours, you're gonna take another reading. If you still have rice after 12 hours, you're gonna discard the rice. So at the end of each day, you're gonna throw out the rice. So what are some other questions that they may ask? The following, an inspector could ask, who is your seafood supplier and where is your HACCP plan and parasite destruction certificates? Well, we already talked about that. Another question that typically would get asked is, where is your logbook, or show me your logbook. Your logbook, this is just a hand-drawn version of your logbook that I sent you, but basically it's going to include date, food handler, you, who is actually taking the pH reading, the acidity pH. This is just your first reading when you're doing the acidity pH, when you're measuring for the first time the pH. Is more vinegar needed? You would, if it reaches 4.1 or less, more vinegar would not be needed. So you would say no, and then over here at the end you would check off achieved 4.1 pH, that you achieved the pH that you're trying to achieve. If you haven't achieved that 4.1 pH, you're gonna take another reading, and then you have to check off if you achieved it. So typically what you guys sent me as far as your recipe was based on 10 pounds of rice and 2 pounds of vinegar seasoning. That's not typically how it's done. So what I included in your plan was a 4-to-1 ratio of rice to vinegar seasoning. Usually that is what is achieves that ratio. If we need to tweak that ratio, usually that is what achieves 4.1 with that miscon vinegar seasoning that you guys are using. If we need to tweak that, we can do that. But what I would recommend is that you keep it that way, so that you have an exact measurement, an exact ratio that you can use to pinpoint where how much of the vinegar seasoning achieves that 4.1. All right, so we're gonna go right into another inspector question. Show me how to make sure the sushi rice is safe or properly acidified, right? Because we're talking about making this rice safe or acidifying it properly. So what does that involve? First thing we're going to do is we're going to calibrate our meter, right? This represents a 4.0 buffer solution, and this is a 7.0 buffer solution. And we're just going to pretend this is a pH meter, right? the meter that you guys showed me that you had is a little bit more complicated than most. So the instruction manual will be at the end of the HACCP plan. What I suggest is that you follow the instruction manual and do a 2-point calibration, which means that you're going to use a 7.0 and a 4.0. It's not necessary to do anything more like a 10.0 solution. All right. So you typically a simpler pH meter, you're just going to dip it into the pH solution, the buffer solution, and it's going to stabilize at around 7.0. Hopefully, if it's accurate, it's going to be exactly 7.0, and you don't have to touch it. What this helps you do is it helps you calibrate it as far as making sure that if it's in a 7.0 buffer solution, it's reading 7.0. With yours, it's it's a digital display. It's a little bit more complicated, so you're gonna have to read the instructions. If it does become too complicated, I would just get a cheap HANA Instruments tester. They're pretty accurate, and they're much easier to calibrate. All right. But you would use it here. You should typically, once it stabilizes, it can take anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. You would press a calibration button, it would calibrate, and then you would go on to the next solution. You would rinse it off a little bit, and then put it into the next solution. Then you would press another calibration button, and it should show you that it is calibrated. All right. So that's one of the first most important steps that health inspector is looking at. You have to have it calibrated. Once it's calibrated, it's ready to go, and you're ready to actually test some rice, right? We're going to pretend that this is a batch of rice, a fresh batch of rice, all right? And we're putting our 4-to-1 seasoning, so 4 parts rice, 1 part vinegar seasoning, right? We're mixing it up thoroughly, making sure that this batch of rice is pretty much saturated with the vinegar seasoning. All right. So once that's done, we're doing a 1-to-1 distilled water to rice mixture. We're going to do it in here. So and when you're taking this sample, you're going to take it from a couple of different places in the actual rice pot, right? Or in the actual rice warmer. All right, so I'm just doing a 1-to-1 ratio, and now with the distilled water, once it's in there, what I'm going to be doing, and you can just come forward and just watch. I'm going to be smashing it up. I'm just going to be mixing it thoroughly and smashing up to make a slurry. What this, you can't measure just dry rice with a pH meter, obviously, because you don't have anything to dip it into. But what this does is it gives us a nice slurry that we can measure with, right? And it's important that you use distilled water because this is neutral. All right. Once we have this mixture, we're just gonna dip the meter right into the watery solution, and that should give us a reading close to 4.1. Hopefully 4.1 or less, right? So if this was, let's say, a 4.2, let's just pretend that I'm filling out this form, right? Right now, there is August. Well, let's say today is August 13th. My name is Romel. The acidity that I got here, let's just pretend that it's a 4.2 or 4.2 pH. All right. Does that more vinegar needed? Yes, I would need more vinegar because it hasn't reached 4.1 or less. So what am I doing now? If you can just back up. Now, if I need more vinegar, I'm going to go back to the same pot, and I'm going to add a little bit more vinegar, mix it up again, and then make another slurry solution. This time, I measure it, and let's say it's a 4.0. achieved 4.1 pH? Yes. And so this is our goal, right? This right here, achieving 4.1 pH, that's our goal. When we can say yes, then that whole process is over. The health department is just looking that you're doing that consistently, that you're calibrating your meters properly, and that your guys actually have a clue as to how to do these things. Let's see. One of the other most important things that you guys have to remember is always use gloves. That would be a reason to close the establishment. Another thing would be also when it comes to food prep equipment, if it's not refrigerated, it needs to be sanitized frequently, at least every 4 hours. And I'm talking about cutting boards, I'm talking about knives, I'm talking about even changing gloves properly. All right, so remember, equipment should be sanitized. And when I'm talking about sanitized, I'm not talking about like you do at home. I'm not talking about detergent and then a rinse. I'm talking about a 3-step process. When we're sanitizing an establishment, we're talking about taking all the big food materials off of let's say a cutting board or a knife. We're talking about having a wash step that you do with a detergent, a rinse step that you do with warm clean water, and then a sanitizing step that you do with a sanitizing solution, maybe bleach, maybe a quaternary ammonia solution, and then air drying. You're never going to towel dry. Apart from that, it's also very important that you have test strips for your sanitizer, sanitizer test strips. Make sure that you're not putting too much bleach in it, because too much bleach can contaminate food, and that you're not putting too little bleach, which is also bad because it's not going to kill pathogens on the cutting board or the knife. Remember, when you guys are handling food, it's almost like you guys are like surgeons. Your hands are expected to be cleaned and sanitized and not have any pathogens on them. So I'm going to be available to talk on the phone, but hopefully this video can help you with your training. I'm also going to have remember to view the guidelines along with the video. All right? Talk to you soon. Take care.